Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, it is July 10th. We have not seen each other in a
Good morning.
We missed the 4th of July, our podcast right before the 4th of July.
Yeah, there's been a number of things going on. You were hoarse.
Yes.
You were a horse one week.
Yes, that was last Friday.
Week, I was away before that.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So at any rate, I wanted to kind of follow up on some of the things about the 4th of July, what it stands for, what the Declaration of Independence, where does it fit in our way of life,
right? And
determining what our culture is. But before we get to that, I would just want to have a little fun with the episodes going, the stuff going on with Graham Platner.
Okay.
And I wanted to kind of get your take on Graham Platner.
My overall take on him is that he is a good illustration of Donald Trump's political skill and how Trump derangement syndrome produces more and more craziness among his opponents. And it's pretty remarkable to me that somebody with his liabilities would ever make it to be a Senate candidate. And what people are willing to overlook to gain the hope of beating Donald Trump is really extraordinary. There's a bunch of examples of it, what people are willing to say and do. In this case, it's what kind of person are they willing to affiliate with.
Well, but that's all true up until when the media turned against him, just like the media turned against Joe Biden. Joe Biden was he had won all of the primaries.
Well, I mean, when you get a very clear signal that you can't win, that's when it switches. That's when it switched with Biden, when he spoke gobbledygook in a debate.
Now, and that makes no sense to me, Michael, because the Democrats claim that democracy is everything. And they had just gone through a primary where Joe Biden literally he won every single every single delegate. He won every single delegate. And Democrats say that democracy is everything. Graham Platner won with 72% of the vote. 72% of the vote in the Democrat primary. But now Democrats then threw Joe Biden out, threw him under the bus.
Right.
And now Democrats are throwing Graham Platner under the bus. And so I'm trying to, as someone who is not a Democrat and who also does not believe that democracy is the end-all, be-all. In fact, I think pure democracy is quite destructive. We'll get into that later.
Yes.
But I'm really interested in how it is that Graham Platner, having won the Democrat primary about 12 days ago, is now being thrown under the bus because everything that was said about him now, except one thing, and that has nothing to do with the allegation of rape. The one thing that is different from 2 weeks ago about Graham Platner that may explain why the Democrats turned on him.
Let's hear it.
He fell behind Collins in the polls.
Well, I didn't know that, but it's exactly what I said about 2 minutes ago, which is they've decided he can't win.
Yes, but so having primaries is irrelevant to them. The point I'm trying to get to is that this really, to me, what they did with Biden, what they're doing with Platner, is demonstrating that when they claim that democracy is everything, that claim is actually proven to be false.
Yes.
By their own actions,
yes.
Because nobody can argue that Trump is responsible for Graham Platner's demise. You might claim he's responsible for his rise.
Yeah.
I don't know if even that's true.
Well, I think there's a correlation with his rise that they're so what's the word?
But they had choices.
Agitated by
Trump.
Trump.
But they had choices.
Yeah.
They had other people they could have picked besides Platner.
Right.
But they picked a person who is a self-described socialist. And there's so many other things about him. But what do you think is going on with Graham Platner? Right? What do you think is going on right now? Why is he? Because he has announced he is going to withdraw. He says he is. I'm giving very careful. You have to listen carefully to what he says. He says he is pausing his campaign. Right. Okay. As of the reports of last night, he had not signed the document withdrawing from the race.
I've seen an article that said he's trying to influence who the pick will be to replace him.
I don't think that's what he's doing.
I have no basis to believe it. That's the speculation I've read.
I will tell you what I believe is going on.
Okay.
That will be proven to be true or false within a year.
Okay.
I believe he is negotiating a multi-million-dollar book deal. I believe that before he signs to withdraw, he's going to become a rich man, and the Democrats are going to make sure of that. That's what it's going to take to get his signature.
No, in other words, they have to buy him out.
They're buying him out with a book deal that is not yet announced.
Okay.
That's what they did with Anita Hill.
Yeah.
In fact, with Anita Hill was even asked under oath if she was going to write a book, and she said no, and then she did, and made millions.
Yeah.
Off for a book deal.
Right.
And so I think this is about money. The other thing that's interesting is I did a little bit of research here because I saw where somebody reported that Graham Platner is on veterans disability. Do you know he's on 100% disability?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, when I looked it up, I said, what is the nature? I looked up and did a search. What is the nature of Graham Platner's veterans disability? And it said he's getting the maximum amount that you can get, $4,800 a month. It's considered 100% disability. And it says he has a herniated disc, he has bad shoulders, bad knees, and PTSD. Okay. And the other thing that might be going on is those benefits may be being threatened by by Democrats who want him out of the race, saying the next time we are in the administration, you will lose those benefits unless you pull out. So I'm just saying there's money going on here. There's something going on with money, but I personally think it's a book deal because that's the way that he can make millions.
Yeah.
And do so, quote, legally.
Right. Well, I forgot how old he is, but the things that you mentioned are pretty typical for older people. Bad knees, bad shoulders.
He's not that old.
Well, yeah. But I'm saying it comes with just wear and tear. It could be combat injuries. I'm not disputing that.
Well, when you watch him campaigning, he's walking around speaking and whatnot.
Right,
I mean, when you're 100% disability, essentially what it is meaning is that you can't hold a job. You're so disabled you can't hold a job. And I suppose holding a Senate seat might
not be considered holding a job.
Some people might consider it to be not holding a job. But anyway, so I just wanted to get your take, and I wanted to kind of get my little 2 cents in there, because the one thing I've not heard any of the pundits.
Probably worth 3 or 4 cents, Crom.
Thank you. Well,
you're underselling yourself.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. And I wanted to get my little deal in there that I think this is about money. Yeah. And I think it will manifest itself in a very nicely funded book deal, guaranteed.
Okay.
So that's it. So I wanted to get to the. And you and I like talking about this, and it might be boring to the audience, but I hope it's not, because it's fundamental to the way our country is organized.
Yes.
And it's fundamental to our prosperity. And so in order to set this up, I do want to talk about a couple of other countries, because I was giving you some data prior to starting our show, and some of that data kind of surprised you a little bit.
It did.
And that is the total size of our publicly traded capital markets
in the United States.
In the United States is about $80 trillion.
Yes.
About $80 trillion. Mm-hmm.
You looked it up. I guessed 20, and you said it's 80.
I pulled it up, and of course, obviously, it depends on what the market is that day or not, but somewhere around 80 trillion. Yeah. And then the private markets, and these has nothing to do with real estate. This only has to do with businesses. Private markets are about 10 trillion. So private companies have a total value.
Private companies. Yeah.
Private companies have a total non-public.
Non-public
companies.
Okay. They're estimated at 10 trillion.
10 trillion. And so then I said, well, what is the total market value of the stock market in Russia? Because everybody says, you have a lot of socialists, these Democrat socialists who want to emulate Russia. The answer is 800 billion, less than $1 trillion. Now, ours is 80 trillion.
Yeah.
Russia's is 800 billion.
So it's about what,
About 1%.
1%.
1% of ours. And Putin is reported to have a net worth of $200 billion. So
Which
he has
is 1/4 of their
1/4 of their equity markets. Xi Jinping is estimated to have a net worth of $800 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Bernie Sanders must be very envious of these communists, because he himself calls himself a socialist, but Karl Marx was a socialist.
Yeah.
Because communism is a form of government, socialism is the equitable redistribution of wealth, which is what Bernie Sanders is all for. But he can't. To me, I'd like to hear him explain how it is that Putin has 1/4 of the wealth in Russia.
Yeah.
As a bureaucrat.
You have other examples too.
The president of Uganda is said to be worth over $100 million, and Uganda is one of the poorest countries in Africa. The Indian population, and Mamdani is from India,
Right.
and the Indian population in Uganda is 1% of the total population. It controls 65% of the wealth in Uganda. So the indigenous population there, the black population in Uganda, is very, very poor, except for the president and I'm sure his entourage, which, by the way, this is how the world has always worked until the United States. It truly is how the world has always worked.
Yeah, and it's really impressive how many places it still goes on. I suspect it's a very similar story in Cuba with Castro, and Venezuela. Until
certainly was,
until recently, until Maduro was
and throughout Africa,
yeah.
The people who rule are the ones who essentially acquire the wealth through theft.
Yeah, I think you have that in Iran, though it's among a clique. The people that run the IRGC, is that what they call it? Iran Revolutionary Guard.
Yeah.
Those are the people that own the industries, kind of like the oligarchs in Russia.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. By the way, in the United States, 62% of Americans own equities.
Mm-hmm.
62% participate in our stock market. So when Bernie Sanders and Mamdani and the socialists say that only the rich are getting rich, that's belied by the facts. 62% of the people are not rich.
Well,
now,
it's the politics of envy.
Yes, it is. That's your point.
Yeah. There was a big book published 20 or 30 years ago. I never read it, but I remember seeing it. It's just titled Envy. And some scholar had just dug into all the implications of envy. And that's a pretty interesting premise, because I think there's a lot of political behavior that's motivated by envy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, when you look at what the Democrats who have the energy today within their party, they are espousing the politics of envy, and ironically enough, they're being backed by many billionaires.
Yeah,
which I don't quite understand, but we'll see where that leads. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get back to, we just celebrated the 250th anniversary of the writing and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and I wanted to just kind of read, because the Declaration of Independence says certain things. And either the Declaration of Independence is worth studying and understanding, or it's just a relic of the past. It's one of those two things.
Okay.
But do you think it could be something in between? Is it?
Well, I like to simplify things and reduce them to clear alternatives. And so I kind of like this way of thinking. But, of course, it can be oversimplified, and I haven't analyzed it. But I'll go with it. I think it's, that's reasonable to say.
Well, let me just. I'm going to quote after the preamble about if you're going to revolt, you owe the world an explanation. I just paraphrased the preamble.
It's a good one.
But then here's what it then says. It says, we hold these truths with an S.
Yes.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, meaning that they don't even require an explanation. Which, by the way, I don't agree with that. I believe that was true in America. I believe that was true to the audience that he was writing to. I don't believe that that's true in a worldwide basis.
Okay.
I think these truths have to be explained. to people who weren't steeped in the literature of the time. But I'll continue. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's one. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's two. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is three. So those are the self-evident truths. To secure these rights, not other rights, these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall most likely affect their safety and happiness. So according to the Declaration of Independence, there are certain self-evident truths. And a just government is formed to protect those truths or to manage those truths. I don't know what the right word is there. And so either that part of the Declaration of Independence is valid or it's not. So what do you think about my statement there? That's either valid or it's not.
Well, self-evident is the gist of that part of it. What is self-evident about it? And to me, it's self-evident that people own their bodies and their labor. You can't take somebody's labor from them justly. Slavery is the principal example of that. It's in the order of things.
Can you take half of it?
Unjust.
Can you take half of their labor?
I think no, it belongs to that person, and it raises a problem with taxation because you take the produce when you tax, and so people agree. I think the idea of our government is people agree to have the government. If they didn't like it, they would overthrow it, but they agree to have it and to pay it some amount of money, and that amount of money has changed widely over 250 years.
Oh boy, it sure has.
Yeah,
it sure has. In fact, let's just talk just briefly about that one. In the last, let's use the last 100 years. When Roosevelt became president, it took office in 1933. The top marginal tax rate was 25%. When Roosevelt died during World War II, the top marginal tax rate was 94%.
Yeah,
and it stayed at 94% all the way through the 50s. Even while Eisenhower was president, the top marginal tax rate was 94%, and a pretty much a middle income person was paying 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
So taxes were quite high. It's interesting, and this is even before entitlements. The only entitlement that existed in the 50s was Social Security. Medicare had not been passed. Medicaid had not been passed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Social Security wasn't that big either.
Social Security was pretty small then. Yeah,
people weren't living into their 80s and 90s so much.
Well, and the tax on Social Security was tiny. Right. It was maybe 1% of $2,000 or something.
Well, there wasn't such a big amount to pay because people were living until 67 or 8, and they retired at 65 or 63. There just wasn't a long time to have to pay, and now demographics changed so much.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that even though these tax rates got very, very high, our democracy or our republic, the way our form of government, our constitutional republic, survived that.
Yeah,
and voters would chime in,
right,
and politicians would run. And the first politician that I remember, and I was born in 1948, and I have a pretty decent memory of the 60s. And Ronald Reagan was the first candidate who ran for president who called for dramatically reducing tax rates. Now, Kennedy reduced tax rates. He reduced the top tax rate from 94% to 70%, which was a pretty significant drop, but still 70% was high.
Right.
And it remained high. And by the way, a single taxpayer, when Ronald Reagan took office, reached the 70% tax bracket at $59,000 of income. couple was about 105,000.
That was in the early 80s?
That was in 1981 when Reagan took the oath of office.
That was 46 years ago, so those numbers would probably be what?
About four times.
4 times?
Yeah. But what happened in the 70s and what created so much of the angst is that people, because of inflation in the 70s, people went from the 30% tax bracket to the 40% tax bracket to the 50% tax bracket because the tax brackets were not adjusted for inflation.
Right.
So inflation pushed you into the higher tax bracket. So if you were in the 50% tax bracket and inflation was running at 10%, which it was actually higher than that, you had to have a 20% increase in your pay just to be able to remain even. And people weren't getting that, which created a lot of the angst. But we're digressing.
Back to the Declaration of the Independence, the other key phrase in there is the consent of the governed.
Yes.
And presumably people elected officials that raised these tax rates that high. And you might make the case that in World War II it was necessary to pay the expenses of an existential war, at least for European civilization. It was existential for England and others. So maybe that was justified. Like a lot of excesses.
I think we also reduced the war debt after the war, after the Second World War.
Kept the taxes higher to reduce the war debt?
I think we did. I'd have to go back and look, but that would make sense to me. I know that the war was very costly. I also know that the war ended up benefiting the United States economically because we were the only industrial base in the world that was left.
Right.
All the rest, their factories had been destroyed by the war, and so in order for Japan to rebuild, for Europe to rebuild, they had to buy capital goods from us.
Right.
But getting back to the Declaration of Independence, that was kind of that's aspirational. That's what motivated people to sign a document that pledged their lives and their sacred honor.
Let's just talk about that for a second. I've seen this in a couple of documentaries that really make the point beautifully, that these are more than just words to pledge their sacred honor.
And their lives.
This was treason.
That's why I said, and their lives.
And their lives, and their sacred honor, and their fortunes. Okay, so everything they had was laid on the line, and if they had lost, they probably would have been hanged.
Yes,
their families would have had everything taken from them.
Right.
Yeah, and so this was the most powerful military in the world at the time. I believe
Britain was.
British
Oh
were.
yes. Yeah.
So I mean, that's shall I say non-trivial. It's more than nice words. It means I'm laying everything out for this.
Yeah.
And there's it's like burning the ships.
Right. It's exactly right. And so at any rate, so they did that. And
in case anyone our listeners don't know what that means, it means when you come up on shore, I think that one of the Spaniards did this when they attacked Mexico. He landed on shore and then burned all the ships, basically say to the soldiers, you're going to win or die because we're not leaving.
We can't leave. Yeah. We're not leaving because we can't. Yeah. So at any rate, so we won the Revolutionary War. Then we passed the Articles of Confederation, which were insufficient. And then we passed the Constitution. And the Constitution set up 3 branches of government. And every federal employee, in fact, I think it's true with every government employee, but I know it's true with every federal employee, that they work for one of the 3 branches of government, and they have to take an oath of office before they draw their first paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
To live under the laws of and defend or whatever it is, the Constitution.
Yes.
And so when you're going to the Congress, you take that oath. How does a socialist take that oath?
Well, I think they probably are not really studying the words very carefully in terms of what they mean. But, we've also said here people believe what they wish to be true, and so I think you twist around what those words mean to make them mean what you want them to mean. Just like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
These words mean exactly what I want them to and what I say they mean.
Yeah, nothing more, nothing less.
Yes, yeah.
So here's what's interesting to me is you've got these 3 branches of government. You have Congress who can pass laws. You have presidents who can sign them or veto them. Congress can override them if they choose. And people who are in the House, they run every 2 years, and so the people can throw them out if they choose to. Mm-hmm. And the Senate, they run every 6 years. People can throw them out if they choose to. And the president every 4 years. And the president can only run for re-election one time. unless it's under unusual circumstances. But I don't. That's the exception, not the rule. So don't need to get into that. That's
Okay.
if you are the vice president and you ascend to the presidency in the final 2 years, then
Okay.
you can be president and still run twice.
Really?
Yes.
So you could have
You
10
can-
years.
You can
to
you
10
cannot
years?
serve more than 10 years.
Okay.
So if you ascend to the presidency in the last 2 years,
Yeah, I didn't know that detail.
yeah, that's just a tiny thing.
Okay.
And I don't know that I don't remember whether we might have had that with Johnson, because we did, because Kennedy was assassinated in '63.
Yeah.
And so
Johnson was elected in 64 and 68?
No, he didn't run in '68.
Oh, that's right.
But he could have.
Okay.
He chose not to.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
so
Nixon
anyway,
won in 68.
interesting little tidbits there.
Yeah.
But Johnson chose not to run
Right.
because he didn't think he could win.
Right.
But the Constitution is designed, when you read the document and you read the Federalist Papers and you read all this, is that the people who make the laws answer to the people.
Right.
Okay, of the people, for the people, by the people, blah blah blah. All this about the people. But starting in the 30s, the Congress passed laws that set up agencies of the federal government that the Supreme Court 91 years ago ruled that even though these agencies were under the executive branch, they were independent agencies, and the President of the United States could not fire them.
And so the idea here was that they would be neutral. They would not be politicized.
They would be experts.
Yes.
This was Woodrow Wilson's view that experts were needed.
Yes.
But experts don't report, are not held accountable by the people.
Right.
This is what's so fascinating to me about what's going on right now with some of these Supreme Court decisions. Some of them I think are very, very good and essential.
Yeah.
That these changes are being made. There's one in particular that came out recently that I think will actually go down as the worst Supreme Court decision in terms of its impact on the country ever, even worse than Dred Scott. And that's the one on birthright citizenship.
Okay.
Because what we're now seeing is we now see hospitals in Texas, for example, that are advertising in Central and South America. Come to Texas to our hospital. We'll deliver your baby and make them a citizen for $3,000, and then you can return home. Who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people will choose to have a baby in U.S. territory, return home, and then that baby is a U.S. citizen, and could be raised in any country in the world and run for president. They're not part of the American culture. Part of it says to run for president, you have to be born in the United States. That the reason for that is they want the person who's president to be an American. If you are a citizen but not an American, you can still be president of the United States.
Yeah.
And
It's got all kinds of bad consequences.
Yeah,
my reading of that is that I kind of follow along with Amy Coney Barrett, which is we'd like the law to say what you're describing and prevent that, but it doesn't say that.
I disagree with her.
Okay.
I believe that what she and Roberts did was they contorted what the law actually says because they want to show that they're independent. I think that this was a terrible decision for the purpose of showing the Supreme Court is independent.
Yeah,
because the law says it includes and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They ignored that. They didn't even explain it. They just ignored it. He used some British term from 1610 about British law in terms of what it meant to be a British citizen. Well, that's fine, but we're not British, and the Constitution. So if you say born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's the at bottom. That's the question. What does that phrase mean?
But if you ignore, aren't you acknowledging that it means something that you don't want to acknowledge? If you're going to just ignore it, because they didn't even explain it, they ignored it.
Yeah, I haven't read the opinion, so I really can't.
Yeah, And that's what Alito and Thomas wrote like a 91-page dissent. Yeah. I mean, first of all, they relied on the 14th Amendment. It's not even the 14th Amendment that applies. It's the 15th Amendment. Well, I mean, what I'm saying is it's a crazy, what Roberts did with Obamacare is similar. He figured out a way in a very contorted way to make Obamacare constitutional. Mm. And the result, by the way, in the case of Obamacare, is that all of the promises that Obama made about Obamacare and reducing the cost of health care and making health care more affordable turned out to be completely and utterly false.
Yes.
And so this gets back to, and this is what I'm trying to tie this into, this gets back to self-evident truths. Mm-hmm. That if you break self-evident truths, if you do things, even though you think you're right, and you break the rules, and I'm not talking about the laws, I'm talking about the rules of nature, the laws of nature. Mm-hmm. And as you said earlier, you said, everybody has a natural right to the fruits of their own labor.
Right.
Okay. Well, I agree that that's true. But if everybody has a right to free health care, if everybody has a right to free education, if everybody has a right to food, if everybody has a right to housing, then people don't have a right to the fruits of their own labor, because somebody has to pay for all of those things for the people whose labor doesn't give them those things.
Yeah, let's dig into this a little bit, because when we had Knowledge Products, we did an audio production on rights. And what I remember from that, and what I learned, because I had not studied this, is the difference between positive rights and negative rights. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of the difference between you may and you must in the law. You're permitted to do things, you're required to do things. A negative right means leave me alone. I get to do what I want to do. It's none of your business. Stay out. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so a positive right is an entitlement. Okay. So these are the list you made to housing, to other things. And the point is, if somebody's got an entitlement, somebody else has to pay for it.
Right.
And that person's negative rights are not respected when they have to pay for an entitlement for someone else.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that then becomes, what I'm saying is, if a self-evident truth, is that people have the right to keep the fruits of their labor.
Right.
Okay. If that is a self-evident truth, if a government breaks that self-evident truth, all I'm saying is bad things will happen.
Yeah.
The predicted outcomes will not be what advocates claimed.
It goes to the nature of property. What is property? It means it's mine and I can exclude other people's influence from controlling it. Okay? Now, property rights have been highly eroded. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's shaved away so that even a rich person, you'll hear someone say, take their money. Throw them in jail, take their money. And they think that the government has the right to do that.
Mm-hmm. If you listen to the Democrat socialists who are running, they actually will say the government should own the means of production. Now that's socialism under Karl Marx's definition of socialism.
Yeah.
That the government should own the means of production. And when they're interviewed, the people who are interviewing them, I've never heard any of them follow up by saying, so are you saying that a small business owner must give their business to the government? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because they ought to have to respond to that. They ought to explain what that means in a real sense.
I think a lot of people in our educational system, we're not taught very much about the limits and strengths of property.
Right. Well, what I'm trying to get at here, and I understand what you're saying, but if it's a self-evident truth, in other words, if it's a law of nature mm-hmm. that is being broken,
right,
by government,
yes,
that is elected by people,
right,
then bad things will happen. What I'm saying is bad outcomes will happen. That's why I talked about how things are in Russia, mm-hmm. and how things are in China, how things are in Uganda. They are breaking those self-evident truths in those countries, and they always have.
Right.
In fact, throughout history, those self-evident truths have been typically broken. It's only in the United States for a period of time, and I would suggest that even today, we are still in a very good position for our society to become more prosperous over time. Now, the best way to create wealth for people who don't have it, that's a very fair question. And, the Trump accounts are interesting to me.
Yes.
Because Trump accounts, any parent who has a child after, I think it was, I don't know what year it was, 2025 through 2028, because that's what the law says, that if you're born in those years, then you can open a Trump account, and the government will put $1,000 in the Trump account. Now, obviously, government had to take that $1,000 from somewhere.
Right.
So you can argue that, well, you've just violated a natural right. You could certainly argue that.
Sure.
But if the objective is to try to level the playing field to some extent, having people participate in the market economy, in the growth of equities, the people who have wealth, they generally didn't earn it all. Their wealth is not all earned. They took some of their earnings and invested it in other people who then worked for their own self, to build their own businesses.
Themselves, yes.
But they then participated in that's why when I say the stock market is worth $80 trillion, the stock market has not always been worth $80 trillion. In fact, it wasn't that long ago that it was worth only $10 trillion.
Let's say a word about the difference between the public and private sector in terms of how it consumes economic resources or produces economic resources. In a bureaucracy, Ludwig von Mises wrote this book called Bureaucracy. I think you remembered it.
Yep.
It's almost unreadable, but his basic point is that a government takes in 100% of what it takes in. It spends 10 to 20 or more percent of it and then distributes 80. It consumes part of what it takes in and administering what then is produced. In the private sector, you are out of business if you do that, right? You've got to take in X amount of money and make it worth X plus 10 or 20 or 30%. That's called a profit. Mm-hmm. And if you can't figure out how to take resources worth X and make it worth 1.2 or 1.3X, you're out of business.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the essence of the difference between the public sector and the private sector. It's why retirement accounts ought to be in the stock market rather than a government benefit.
Well, if it's a government benefit, it's growing off of other taxpayers. If it's in the stock market, it's growing with the economy as a whole. Yeah. This, to your point, there's a very interesting story that I was going to get to later, but you brought it up, so I'll find it here real quickly, and that is that there's a department of the government called it existed under Biden. It was called the Minority Business Development Agency. They did an audit of that agency and found that 96% of the $16 billion was not properly vetted before it went out. 96%, which means it mostly was given out based on cronyism because the businesses failed.
The businesses, they got the money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's $16 billion. And it says $15.4 billion of the $16 billion in transactions reviews were duplicate, I'm quoting, quote, duplicate transactions with missing or inadequate documentation, or transactions that MBDA should not have approved based on the underlying activity. So this is people who are politically connected,
right?
Applied for this money and got it, and then essentially their business, if they even conducted a business, did not succeed.
I think there are dozens of examples like this. We're starting to see there's fraud.
Everywhere.
Yeah, and it's a way of paying off your political.
Yeah, and so this gets
cronies.
back to and Mike, this gets back to these self-evident truths. When governments, even elected governments, when they break the rules, the self-evident laws of nature, when they do that, bad things happen.
Right.
And so they don't happen all at once, and they're not necessarily obvious immediately. But over time, bad things happen, and the foundation of the society begins to crumble. And so I want to get. So now let's get to the Constitution and some of these recent decisions. We've talked a little bit about birthright citizenship, and by the way, Trump has asked apparently. you can ask to have your case reviewed by the Supreme Court within 25 days if there's a reason to do so. You have to have a reason to do so. Trump is using these hospitals advertising in Central and South America as evidence of their argument being true, which the majority did not take into account.
The government's case to remove birthright citizenship. You're saying this is evidence.
This is evidence that when.
And you think the Supreme Court might reconsider?
Well, hold on. I'm just telling you. I'm just giving you the facts.
I'm trying to keep up with you, Carl.
There's another fact is that in order for the Supreme Court to agree to review a case, somebody who loses does have 25 days to ask the court to review it. If one of the justices who sided with the majority says, yes, we should review it, then the Supreme Court will review it. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most people, and I'm included in this, believe that the Supreme Court decision was 5-4. Okay?
Okay.
But there was another Kavanaugh voted with the 5 to make it 6-3 on some element of the case.
Okay.
So now the question is,
does that
qualify him to say we should rehear it? So all I'm doing is say, I don't know, but I want our podcast to be relevant if things do happen, so we can say, gee, aren't we brilliant? But
that's very interesting, and it sounds like
I don't
intrigue.
I don't know if it's going to happen, but if it does, maybe people heard it here first.
Well, there's so many subtleties in the law, nuances, and you have lawyers who have to master this, right? And in a sense, it's one of the problems of having a big government with so many laws that nobody can understand what they are.
Yeah.
You get to find out after the bill has been signed, as Nancy Pelosi famously said. And it's no way to run a country where people don't know what the laws are because you can't comply with something you don't know or understand.
And what we've had over close to 100 years is we've had rules written by regulators who are not elected by Congress, and the laws are not passed by Congress.
Yes.
So they're not even accountable to the voters at all.
Right.
And they are the ones who have written most of the laws. Yes. Because a regulation that is binding,
has the force of law.
Has the force of law, and so what happened was the Supreme Court recently, and I don't remember the name of the case, but it recently overturned and said that Trump could fire. I think it may be the Slaughter case.
Okay.
But it was Trump could fire. Slaughter was a person who is picked to be on the FTC board or whatever it is.
Federal Trade Commission?
Federal Trade Commission. Trump came in, wrote her a letter and said, your ideas and what you want to do are contrary to what I was elected to do. You're fired.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so she sued and lost. Supreme Court ruled. It flipped a 91-year-old decision. And said that every employee who's a member of the executive branch does report ultimately to the president.
Yeah.
So therefore the authority of the president over the bureaucracy has now fundamentally changed, which I believe is important, because if the bureaucracy doesn't report to Congress and doesn't report to the executive branch, then that means the voters have no way of saying the bureaucracy is too powerful.
Yeah, it's effectively a fourth branch of government.
That
the Constitution doesn't provide for that.
Doesn't provide for that. And so this is why when people say, well, why I like that person. She had good ideas. Well, that may be. But the way our constitutional republic works is that we hold elections so that the people have a chance to chime in on what they want the future to look like. And the people who are elected need to have the authority to try to achieve that future. And so that was one decision that I thought was a very interesting decision. The other decision that turns out it's not as impactful as I thought it would be, because I misunderstood it, is the one where it says now that political parties, it used to be that political parties there was kind of a wall between the political parties and the candidates that they couldn't coordinate their efforts.
Right.
And now and the Supreme Court has now ruled that political parties and candidates can coordinate their efforts. I thought it meant that these PACs or these other organizations that raise money.
PAC is a political action committee.
Yes, I thought they could coordinate with candidates, and apparently that's not the case. That wasn't what this case said.
The parties, not the political action committees.
Not the political action committees, but I still think it will impact the election somewhat. Mm-hmm. And also it's also going to be interesting because PACs still can be involved, and people can contribute. I believe they can contribute unlimited amounts of money to PACs, but the PACs cannot coordinate with the candidates. They can just espouse points of view. They can get out the votes, this type of thing.
Right.
And so that'll be interesting to see in this upcoming election. What I wanted us to really hone in on here is that we do have these three branches of government, and one of the things about Trump that really enrages the left is that Trump truly is trying to shrink the size of government. He is truly trying to shrink the size of government, and I think that creates more of the Trump derangement syndrome than any other thing that he's actually doing, because he is shrinking. I mean, he fired or gave. He told government employees, you can either take this 6-month severance package and leave, or you can take your chances that we reduce the size of your area, and then you'll get no buyout. And so hundreds of thousands of federal employees took the buyout.
Right.
And that all of the money that was spent on the buyouts is now in the past.
Right.
And so the fiscal and also the other thing Trump did was he told regulators, if you're going to offer a new regulation, you need to accompany that with 10 regulations you want to eliminate. 10. So that really forces the regulators to think very hard about whether or not they think a new regulation that they think should be promulgated is worth also eliminating 10.
Let me try this on with you. What do you say are the major differences between the parties? If you boil it down, we've talked about simplifying things down to their essence.
Yeah, okay.
One or two things that are the main differences.
I think the Democrat Party, and I've said this before, I think the Democrat Party is controlled by the government employee unions. Mm-hmm. I believe that if you are a Democrat who wants to run for office, you're not in office, you want to be a candidate. If you're a Democrat, I know that you are interviewed by somebody who is a government employee union representative.
Yeah, I got it. So you're elaborating on a point that I think you're saying that the left is
the party of government.
Party of government.
And expanding government.
Yes. Anything else?
I don't think the Republican Party is the opposite of that, but I don't think they're that. So I don't think there's that the Republican. I think Trump is a Republican who wants to cut government more than any other Republican in my lifetime.
Right.
Who's openly wanting to shrink the size of government.
Right. So I think there are two things that are the main differentiators. One is exactly that. The left wants to expand government. The right generally wants to expand the private sector. As you've said, it's not universal on the right, and that's one of the reasons we keep creeping toward bigger and bigger government, because there's not an equal swing of the pendulum to the other side. I think the other thing is the difference between rural and urban populations. If you look where the blue states are, they're in highly populated cities. Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. We have Seattle, New York.
Yeah. All cities, all big cities,
with one or two exceptions.
I
think there's one or two red cities of any size.
Yeah.
And there's something about that. I think about the way people live and the way they interfere with each other or conflict, in urban settings, leads them to crave government. And, people in rural areas are more independent. They need their guns to handle the thief or the predator.
And they also tend to help each other.
Yeah.
If their neighbor's in trouble, they go over and help them.
Well, and they can't count on the police showing up within a few minutes to protect them.
Right.
So I think there is an essential difference that way. The founders are very aware of this. It's one of the reasons they founded the Electoral College, because they knew if they didn't, the cities would basically run the government. And you wouldn't need to pay attention to anyone else because they didn't count.
Right.
If you have a pure democracy, you just count the votes and you get the cities and then you're done.
Yeah.
You don't even have to go to the middle of the country.
Right. Well, and the Electoral College giving the states the way they did this, and that was an interesting that whole part of negotiating that part of the Constitution. That was exactly what you're talking about. The city people wanted the cities to have more power, and they
still do.
Yeah, but I'm saying at the time the Constitution was written,
right.
And in order to get out of the room with a Constitution that the people in the room would agree to, the parties had to negotiate. They negotiated that out.
Right.
And so I think that's a really good point, Mike. That the red, because when you look at the end of when you look at a map of the country. After the election is held, the map is almost all red.
At a county level.
At the county level, at just the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost all red, but then the blue is where there's very, very dense populations. And then and what's also, though, interesting is that there are states that have big cities that are red states.
Well, yeah, I went to college in Atlanta. And a friend of mine said there's Atlanta and everything else in Georgia. And I've seen that in the decades since. There's a number of states like that. In Illinois, there's kind of Chicago and everything else. There's New York City and everything else. Now, there's bigger cities like Buffalo. This is take it with a grain of salt. But, you have in California, San Francisco and Los Angeles, maybe San Diego, but especially L.A. and San Francisco, and then everything else. There even are some red counties in California. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of red ground in California, but when you get to Georgia, what's interesting about Atlanta, and this is something people don't, unless you look, because it surprised me when I looked. The city of Atlanta is only 700,000 people.
Yeah,
the greater Atlanta is 7 million.
Yes,
and so when you say the city of Atlanta is blue. It's the city of Atlanta is really blue.
Really
That's 700,000.
Yeah.
And then as you draw circles from the center of Atlanta out, as you move farther out from Atlanta, even though it's in that 7 million population, it turns red.
Right.
And it's like we're here in Nashville. There's Davidson County is
quite blue.
Is it's probably 60% blue. It's not as blue. Because we're the whole county, we're not a small. Geographically, Nashville is not a small city. Geographically, Nashville is a huge city because we're the whole county. Mm-hmm. We're what is called a metropolitan form of government. The only other one I know of,
the city merged.
Yeah, the only one I know of is Jacksonville. Jacksonville,
okay.
Florida,
right,
is like Nashville, and the county and the city are one and the same.
Yeah,
and so then the counties that surround Nashville are generally quite red.
Right.
But even Davidson County, the whole county, while it votes Democrats for local government, there are certain reasons for that that I believe are local. Its local elections are held at odd times. Voter turnout is very low in our local elections. Government employees tend to be much more likely to vote in a local election than the population as a whole.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, you end up getting elected officials that are elected primarily by government employees, and but Nashville exists within a state where state sovereignty is a big deal, and if the city council of Nashville does something that's particularly egregious, generally speaking, the legislature will come in the next session and undo that.
Oh, they get in fights all the time.
They do, and it's interesting to kind of watch. But
well, you have a similar thing in Texas because the cities there are quite blue. Mm-hmm. Austin is very blue.
Austin is very blue.
Houston is quite blue. So I think the pattern holds. Missouri, is a red state, but St. Louis is a very blue place, and it's very small. The city of St. Louis is especially tiny.
Well, it's like Memphis. Yeah. Memphis is a small city.
Yeah.
Shelby County is a big county. Yeah. Memphis is small.
Right.
And but I think your point about the urban, focusing on urban, that is typically very blue.
So why is it, do you think, urban people want big government?
Well, I think urban people benefit more from government than rural people. I think that's absolutely true. And
it's worth thinking about how and why. I'd like to understand that better. I think it's kind of natural affiliation. You need to control these people that are right on top of you and beside you and underneath you.
Well, and governments are generally bigger in urban areas. Government employees are generally paid better than a person who has a similar job in a small town, in a town of 30,000 or 20,000. The city employees there are, they're all, you can almost say they're public servants. They're not paid a lot of money because the tax revenue is not that high.
Yeah,
and so governments tend to be bigger. They tend to have more money, and so it's going to be But that's interesting, and part of what the Constitution recognized is that we don't want states to coin money because under the Articles of Confederation they could, and so what you have is you do have some constraints on states that they can't spend other than now we're learning the fraud through the entitlement programs. That is a way for states to spend money that isn't theirs.
Right.
But what's interesting is the bluer the state, the higher the taxes, and they are the least affordable places to live by these definitions of affordability.
Well, this gets back to this formula that I gave, where if you're in the government, you use part of the 100% to distribute, 75, 80, 85%.
Or maybe you're only distributing 60%.
60 or maybe 10.
Yeah.
We're finding in some of these fraud programs they're distributing 5 or 10.
Right.
Right.
And they're keeping the rest, and then they turn around and spend it. But on our island, we pointed out that if 10 people are working, and just for oversimplifying, we found on the island that if 10 people are working and each person on the island is producing 10 units, and it takes 10 units of consumption to live, and if one of the 10 people decides and convinces the others that one person should now stop working in the private sector but become the government of the island in the name of serving all the people, the other 9 people have to pick up that one person's production.
Yeah, let's just say this in a short phrase, which is that government is not productive. It is consumptive.
It is inherently
it's consuming.
Yes, it is inherently wasteful.
It's consuming resources.
Yeah.
Right. The private sector has to be productive or it goes out of business.
And so therefore it has to produce more than it consumes.
Right.
Government does not have to produce more than it consumes. And in fact, the more it consumes, the more it wants to consume.
The more it wants resources.
The more it wants resources.
Which are taken by force.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, Michael, I don't know if today I wanted to kind of review the Declaration of Independence and those core self-evident truths. I wanted to kind of stipulate that if those self-evident truths are then broken, bad things happen.
Well, it was an enormous gift to the world, certainly to our country. To me, the essence of it is that you require the consent of the government. The government works for the people and not the other way around. Sovereignty was inverted from nearly every place in the world to a new system where government is supposed to respond to the people. That's what we mean by democracy, I think. When people say it with a reverential tone, is the government has to be responsive to the people.
Yeah.
But what I think we're also acknowledging is that pure democracy is destructive.
Well, and our Constitution was designed with the idea that pure democracy is not sustainable.
That's right, and we don't have a pure democracy.
Tyranny of the majority was what they were concerned about,
right?
Because the smallest minority is the individual.
Right.
That's the smallest possible minority.
Right.
And so I've enjoyed the discussion today. I hope it was useful. We're going to kind of put a bow in it for the Declaration of Independence. I'm sure we'll be talking about the Constitution as new rulings come out in the future. As far as we try to kind of keep an idea or have a brief discussion about how what we're talking about applies to the upcoming election. I don't have anything particularly to add at this point. I think that there's some people who have won primaries that are social, that call themselves Democrat socialists, who are running in districts that lean slightly red.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to listen to them try to redefine themselves to be appealing. And so they're now saying things that are completely contradictory to what they said a year ago.
Well, I think you and I would both agree that these policies are not going to work. They're destructive, and how long is it going to take for the voters to recognize that they're hurting themselves?
They haven't been implemented yet. The policies that are in place right now are not bad. They're pretty good. But the Democrat socialists are running, saying we need to overturn all these.
Yeah,
we need to raise taxes. We need to have wealth taxes.
What I'm saying is, how long will it take people to figure out that that's not the solution? I think it will hurt the places that adopt those policies, and those people will continue to leave.
Yeah.
I don't have a crystal ball for this midterm elections or even the presidential election, but I am pretty convinced that the demographics are shifting.
The demographics
leave blue cities and blue states, go to red ones, and that is a big deal.
Yeah, and one of the bellwethers is California. There is a ballot. There was a referendum that got enough signatures, so it is now on the ballot in California to have a one-time tax of 5% on the net worth of anybody who has more than $1 billion, and $1 billion net worth.
Right.
And by the way, people who have, I'm going to use $10 billion because that's a lot of money. Okay, people who have a $10 billion net worth, I will promise you, they do not have $500 million of cash. That money is tied up in something,
right,
which they would then have to sell,
right,
which then
decrease
has a whole
value.
Which then, well, not only that, they then have to pay taxes, capital gains taxes on what they sold,
right,
in order to pay the $500 million. And so the tax is not 5%. It's probably closer to 8 or 9% of
so
what
it's a destroy wealth.
It's a wealth destroying tax. And the thing is that once California does it once, well, then why not do it again?
Yeah.
And if you're a person, and then why not lower it to 500 million, and or lower it to 100 million? And so for the people in California who are looking at this thing, if that one tax passes, I think that the exodus from California, people with north of 100 million, which is that's a lot of money, but the number of people with more than 100 million who run small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, they'll move their whole businesses, to get away from that risk. And so that'll be interesting to watch this coming November.
So buy property in Tennessee.
Buy property in Tennessee and start your business in Tennessee for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Happy 250th.
Yeah, you bet. You too.